How's it going, guys? Today I'm going to be doing my best films of 2022. Now, I normally do a top 10 list, but with this year there being so many honorable mentions, I felt it was appropriate to do a supplemental video, and then later on I would do my top 10 list, and that would be over at my friend Chad's channel. So be sure to check that out. But for now, let's dive into the best films of 2022 by category. So the first category is Best Comedy, and we had quite a bit of comedies this year that really were great. I think four come to mind, Glass Onion being one of them, Bodies, 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 and The Menu. I know that one wasn't as big of a hit with a lot of people, but I thought it was a really solid film as well. But the one that stood out the most among all of them was The Banshees of Inisherin. Colin Farrell has been having a tremendous year this year, and it's one of his best films of the year. Really great performances. The dark comedy really worked as well. We've had quite a bit of dark humor throughout the year, like with the Triangle of Sadness being another one. But this one had the perfect blend, and the chemistry between both actors. They've worked together before, and that chemistry from the previous film just like transfers over here, and it's what really makes the film, because the story is very simple, but even sometimes the simplest of stories, as long as the humor works, really can make the film stand out, and that just happens to be the case with this film. Next up, since we're in comedies, might as well go on to rom-coms, and usually a genre that I don't really go to, but occasionally I'll watch a few of them, especially if any of them are getting any buzz. This year, I can't say there was any that were getting too much attention, but there were three that stood out of the maybe like four or five I've seen this year. And Good Luck to You, Leo Grande would be one of them, as well as Amazon's I Want You Back. But the one that had them both beat would be Cha 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 Real Smooth. It was very heartfelt, a touching story. It didn't rely too much on typical rom-com tropes, and I feel like that's what kind of separated from the rest of the other films in the genre. Next up, Best Horror Film. Quite a bit of these titles, don't really even know where to get started. I have a list over here, it's just too many to memorize. But we had Hellraiser. I know not a lot of people liked them, but I really liked the interpretation. Felt definitely fresh. Speaking of fresh, there's a movie called Fresh. Somehow it's a film that just I keep wanting to watch over and over again. Really enjoyed that one. Pearl, Bones and All. Barbarian was another great one. The one film that I think is better than all of these would have to be The Finlands, Hatching. Was able to see this in theaters with a friend, and it caught me off guard. Was not expecting anything. It was more than a traditional monster film. Had something to say. The CGI blended in with the practical effects worked really well. It's bizarre, it's creepy, and I thought it was the most unique one of the year. It was really high up on the list for me. Next up, Best Superhero Film, and let me tell you, superhero films were just not that great this year. We had some really bad ones, mostly from Marvel, but I won't completely trash Marvel because they did at least produce one solid film, and that was Wakanda Forever. But we all know that there was one film that was better, or at least I think we all know, and that was Matt Reeves' The Batman. Somehow, the God knows how many interpretations of the Batman we've gotten at this point, somehow this feels different. It's not the same old thing. I really like the environment, the score, the acting. I mean, I know we all doubted Robert Pattinson, but he was really spectacular in the role, and the film really encompassed everything that I wanted to see in a Batman film, and kind of had this like psychological thriller aspect to it with also elements of noir. Really loved it. One of the hands down one of the best films of the year, not just the best superhero film of the year. Um, really don't have anything negative to say about it. I really enjoyed it. I know it's 3 hours, but so is Wakanda Forever. So, it's interesting how the longer superhero films of the year were actually some of the better ones we've gotten. Next category, Best Period Piece. There was a few of those this year. We've had Steven Spielberg's The Fabelmans, then we had The Northman, a smaller indie film, The Road Dance. But the one that I feel like I'm going to remember more than any other films would have to be Babylon. Just amazed by that film, at the editing, the production, the set pieces, the sound design, the score, the acting, and just bringing that time period to life, even though it might be a slight bit exaggerated. Like, I don't imagine the 20s being like that, but of all the films, I think that one really impressed me. Best international film. So many good international films this year. I don't want to miss any of them. Quiet Girl might not be for everyone, but it's a really touching and heartbreaking story. It gets you at the end, and that music hits. It's a real tearjerker. That would be a film from Ireland. Then there was another film called Mirina from Croatia. All Quiet on the Western Front, the German film that premiered on Netflix. Then there was a French film, really gripping film. It's called Happening. Then we had Hatching, which we already talked about, from Finland. And then there was an Iranian film called Holy Spider that I recently saw that just made this cut. But the one film that impressed me above all was Decision to Leave from Korea. Incredibly visually looking film. Cinematography is just staggering. Performances are excellent. It has a feel of Basic Instinct, but it does its own thing aside from that. Of all of the ones I've seen this year, it's one that stood out the most. Next up, Best Fantasy Film. Not too many of them, like, not at least big budget films. The Northman would be one, but it's kind of a no-brainer this year that Avatar Way of the Water is going to take that spot because it was a very striking film. The effects were incredible. The immersive experience was there. This superseded my expectations. Way superseded my expectations. So I think it's only right to give Best Fantasy Film to Avatar because that was the most teleportive film of the year. Next up, Best Animated Film. And let me tell you, animation was not that great this year. If it wasn't for two films, this would be a really disappointing year for animation. Puss in Boots was alright. Every Pixar film or Disney film was very underwhelming. Nothing special about them at all. Very forgettable films. Apollo 10.5 would be the runner-up. But the first place winner, of course, for me, would have to be Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. No brainer there. Visually amazing looking film. Actual originality, despite being a story that has been told countless times. Not only just countless times, but apparently this year we've had another take on Pinocchio, and that film right there went to show the difference. Within 5 minutes, this Pinocchio film blew the other Pinocchio film we got this year out of the water. No question about it. Voiceover work was great, animation was beautiful, and I like that they changed up the story a little bit and gave us some more backstory on who these characters are and why there would even be a need for a Pinocchio character, in the story to begin with. Best Thriller. So I gotta give out a shout out to Rebecca Hall in Resurrection because while the movie is flawed, Rebecca Hall's performance is absolutely fantastic and she holds that entire movie up, and because of that, I think it is actually worth checking out. Black Phone, kind of underrated title, but I remember enjoying that in theaters. Then we have two of the more smaller scale films, Duel and Kimmy. Kind of took me off my guard, but at the end of the year, those were titles that kind of stood out to me. Maybe not titles worthy of the top 10 for the year, but movies that if you do see them, do check them out. They were really solid. The runner-up would be Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Despite the characters being kind of just despicable, you don't like anybody and everybody's so stupid. I had a lot of fun with Bodies, Bodies, and it worked a lot as a thriller. I wouldn't say it's a horror film, that's why I kind of put it in this category. But there was one film that I recently saw that just was able to make it, and the best thriller for me in the year was the Iranian film Holy Spider. A film that had a lot of tension, it was visceral, the acting was incredible, it had really great atmosphere. It's a movie that sticks with me more so than any other thriller this year, and a thriller that I was more impressed with than any other. Next up, Best Western. If you can even say Best Western. This genre is just like so hard to come by good films. Occasionally, we'll get some really great films from big directors like Tarantino. Even last year, we had two very good westerns. One that I was kind of indifferent about, and that was Power of the Dog. And then there was another film called Old Henry, which was my favorite. This year really struggled to find a good western. We had a film from Terrence Hill called Dead for a Dollar. That should have been the best western of the year. The cast was stacked. You had a veteran director who's done plenty of really good westerns, and that could have been one of the worst westerns of the year. So when it comes down to it, there was only like two movies worth even mentioning, and that would be Murder at Yellowstone, which was honestly not that good. But considering every other Western this year, that would be one of the better ones. The best Western of the year technically isn't even a Western. It's more like a neo-Western, if anything, and that would be God's Country. It's an average film. Like, there's nothing really wrong with it. It's just very simple. It's been done a million times. But it's done in a way where it works, and the performances are good, cinematography is good, and the acting was solid. So, of all of the ones this year, that is the only one I can actually recommend anyone watch, because Murder at Yellowstone was more so just banking on the title, because Yellowstone is a popular TV show now. In reality, not a good year for westerns. Maybe next year. Next category, best score. I'd say there's only about 3 films that really kind of impacted me in terms of score. Maybe 4. Yeah, I'll go with 4. Quiet Girl was one of them. Holy Spider. After Yang. But the one that really stood out for me this year has to be Babylon. It's the most memorable of all of them. Surprisingly, you would think a movie about a composer would make the cut, but yet can't really say that movie even had a score, which was very surprising. Next category is Best Acting, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this up into 3 categories: Best Actor, Actress, and Ensemble. And Best Actor, that's going to go to Brendan Fraser for The Whale. What a performance that was. I think that was the most memorable one I've seen this year from a male actor. As far as Best Female Performance, I know most people are pushing for like Michelle Yeoh and Kate Blanchett, but for me, I'm going to go ahead and pick a more of a dark horse, not for the Oscars or anything, but I'm going to go ahead and say Taylor Russell from Bones and All, because I think she just gave such a sensational performance that she's going to get snubbed, so I might as well go ahead and mention her, because that was probably the best for me. As far as ensemble goes, I'm going to give it to Everything Everywhere All at Once, because I feel like everybody really worked well together in all their scenes. Babylon isn't too far off from there. As far as cinematography goes, we're going to give that to Decision to Leave. A lot of really good visually striking films in the year, but it just has to be this movie. I know a lot of people are going to say Top Gun or Avatar, and no doubt about it, Avatar deserves that. Avatar is mostly CGI though, so I don't really know. Editing, I'm going to give it to Babylon, because I don't know how in the world did Damien Chazelle put that movie together. That is one crazy film, and I don't know how he kept his head straight trying to put that movie together in the editing room. So that hands down goes to Babylon. Next up, Best Visual Effects. And that's kind of a no-brainer. It has to go to Avatar 2. Just, we're not even questioning that. Best Sound. There were 3 films that had the best sound design, and that would be Top Gun, The Batman, but the one that beat them both would be The Northman. Just such an energy-packed film because of that sound design. I have to give it to that film. Best Documentary. Did not see too many documentaries this year. There was not too many that really caught my eye. There was one I wanted to watch I wasn't able to catch. But of the ones I'd seen, Fire of Love was one of the best documentaries I've seen this year. Mostly impressed with the archival footage, and it's just insane archival footage. It was like a documentary within a documentary almost. Next up, Best Biopic. I'm going to give this to Elvis. I'm not really going to praise Elvis for anything else, but in terms of biopics, it was probably the most entertaining one of the bunch. and the one that had the most artistic flair that wasn't like completely terrible. um, because Blonde has to be one of the worst of the year, and I'm trying to think of other biopics, and there just weren't too many of them. Till was just okay. I know a lot of people are praising that, but I'm gonna have to give it to Elvis because She Said was a very average biopic, journalistic film, whatever you want to call it. Could have been so much better. Next up, best A24 film. We had Men, we had Bodies, 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 After Yang, The Whale, but this year A24 brought us a fantastic film in Everything Everywhere All at Once. In a world full of films about crossing into other dimensions and multiverses, this gave us the most unique and fresh take on it, with heart, with a message, not only message for teenagers but also a message for immigrants. Next up, best Netflix film. It was really down to two, Glass Onion and All Quiet on the Western Front. And I had to give it to Glass Onion. I think it was the most well-rounded film. It made me laugh. The mystery was intriguing. The twists kept coming. It was off to a rocky start at first, but eventually the film found its footing, and it was one of the better comedies of the year, and I'd say the best Netflix film. Next up, the best Disney/Hulu film. The two runner-up would be Wakanda Forever and Fresh, but to me, it's going to be Avatar 2. That's the one that's going to stick the landing. Not sure how that's going to hold up over time, but for now, that was Disney's best film. Next up, Amazon. So Amazon was having a really weird year this year because they were spending way too much time investing in TV shows that just fell completely flat. That came with Wheel of Time and Rings of Power. Completely just abysmal shows. I don't want to completely trash them, but just so underwhelming. And they only had two films this year that are even like worth mentioning, and one of them I didn't even see, but it did win an award, and that was Argentina 1985. Didn't see it. One that stood out to me the most was actually that rom-com, I Want You Back. Solid film, really good time. Not much really happening at Amazon this year. As far as HBO goes, HBO is usually really good with their TV shows, but in terms of movies, The Batman takes center stage. I think that was their best film. So that about does it for my best films of 2022. You can find a more comprehensive list on my Letterboxd account, which I'll link down below. Be on the lookout for my best films of 2022 on my friend Chad's channel. Should be interesting trying to narrow all of these titles down to form one top 10 list. That's really why I made this, because there's just too many titles to not include, because there's a lot of films that are worth checking out. So that really does it for this video. You guys can like, comment, and subscribe down below. I really appreciate the support, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.